Hello and welcome to this week's Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to be joined today by Sarah Mitchell, who's in charge of our documentation department. And Sarah has put together a presentation for you on something I think a lot of you are going to find super interesting, and that is Alpha Launch. With Alpha Software recently putting Alpha Launch or updating Alpha Launch into the App Store so that it's up and ready with the newest plugins and all that, it is ready for you to use. What it lets you do, of course, is it lets you take your application and create it so that it gets installed as what feels like a native app. We call it a hybrid app onto an Android or iOS device, and you could do that without having to go through the stores. That's one of the huge benefits because our app is already in the store for you. Anyway, I hope I did an okay explanation as to what it does, but here to give you a proper explanation is Sarah Mitchell. Hello, Sarah. Are you there?
I am here, and I just started
Excellent.
sharing my screen.
Great. Let me go ahead
Yeah.
and so you're already the presenter and I can see your screen, so we're good.
All right. Okay, graphics card. And I assume you can see that.
I do.
All
Just a quick
right.
reminder, of course, for folks who are new, you can always type questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel, as well as send us emails to guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. So take it away, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. I figured it out. There we go. Welcome, everybody. I want to talk to you a bit about Alpha Launch. It's a way to deploy your mobile apps without going through the App Store. Alpha Launch has been around for a while, and as part of the new requirements around the UI Web View, WK Web View for mobile apps, and just, it's been a while since we updated it. We redid the backend on Alpha Launch and deployed a new version to both the iOS and Android app stores. You can find it by searching for Alpha Launch in the app stores. I forgot to include the QR codes here today for you guys, but it's easy to find. But it's an app we put together to solve a problem, and that is that publishing to the app store isn't easy. And this is a workflow of going to the iOS App Store, the Apple App Store. It's very involved. You have to build your Alpha Anywhere application as a Cordova application using either an Ionic App Flow or Cordova CLI. Both of these things will either require um, an account with Ionic, or if you're going the Cordova CLI route for an iPhone app, then you have to own a Mac, which requires buying a Mac if you don't have one already. And then when you're ready to go to deploy, you have to buy into the Apple Developer Program. You have to create certificates. You have to create provisioning profiles. You have to make your App Store listing. You have to submit your app for review. And then if your app gets rejected, you have to do that process again and again and again until eventually, hopefully, you're accepted. So, that process is long and involved. It requires multiple accounts for multiple things. If you're going through iOS, the approval process takes time. It's not an overnight kind of thing. You have to jump through a lot of hoops. And your app at the end of the day can be denied. And you have to do this every time you want to update your app as well. We do offer instant update for your apps with Alpha Anywhere apps, but at some point you're going to hit something that's you have to update your plugins, which you can't do through an instant update. So you're gonna have to go back through that App Store process again. So that's where Alpha Launch comes into play. You don't have to go through the App Store. You can deploy your apps and test them quickly using Alpha Launch, and you don't need to buy any extra accounts. You don't need to buy a Mac. You don't need to use Ionic App Flow to build your apps. You don't have to get a developer account. But because those things don't exist, there are a few caveats. First of all, Alpha Launch is our app, so it's branded by Alpha Software. You can only use the plugins that we've included, and your apps that you deploy to Alpha Launch cannot be discovered through the App Store. People can't go to Google Play and search for your app and find it. It's not going to be there. So if you need branding, if you need plugins that we don't include, or if you need people to find your app in public app stores through searching, you have to go a different route, either the process I described previously or you can contact us to get a custom Alpha Launch deployment, which will include everything that you ask for. We'll deploy it for you, and then you can publish from your application from Alpha Anywhere to your version of Alpha Launch as you need. So today I'm going to talk to you mostly about this checklist of what it takes to get your app into Alpha Launch. It looks like a lot, but most of these tasks are pretty simple and straightforward. We're going to talk about making an exit button. We're going to talk about making a test A5W page and why you might want to do that, especially if you've never published Alpha Launch before. We're going to talk about publishing your project, the project being your app itself to your application server. That's the web application server. It's the standard standalone one. It's the IIS. It's Alpha Cloud. All of those are application servers. We're going to look at that test A5W page URL. We're going to configure an Alpha Launch app. We're going to set up the server URL, which is a hot topic. We're going to talk about download location, why you want to generate and save a QR page, and then finally the publishing your Alpha Launch assets and getting them installed on Alpha Launch. So this first thing here is really important, and if you mess it up, you'll know when you've messed it up because you won't be able to exit your app to get back to the Alpha Launch app list screen, in which case at that point you have to figure out how to force quit it. And if you plan on deploying more than one app, you really want to have this exit button. Otherwise, people will get stuck and confused. And all you really need is a button or a link, something the user clicks to just call this chunk of code. And all it does is just take them back to the app screen to list all the Alpha Launch apps. Another thing you want to consider doing, and you really only need to do this if you can't answer the question, what is your server URL, is to make a test A5W page that you are going to publish and then later open so that you can answer that question, what is your server URL. It's really important to know what your server URL is, and that's not necessarily the same thing as where your apps get downloaded for install. When you have those two things, you have your exit button in your app and you have that test A5W page. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to publish a project, which is the project that contains your app, to the Alpha Anywhere application server using your publish profile to publish there, whether that's FTP, HTTP publish, Alpha Cloud, or going to IIS. You're going to publish those files to the server. When you do that, you want to make sure you also configure your connection strings, including any storage connections that you have, and make sure those are configured properly as if you are publishing your app to a website for use. And then the last thing you're going to want to do is you want to make sure to check this button down here, box down here. It says launch browser after files are published. And the page you want to show is that test A5W page. And the reason you want to do that is because that's going to indicate to you whether or not your app files have been published properly and can be accessed and run with Alpha Launch. So when you've done this, you've published, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to start preparing the Alpha Launch component of configuring things. And that's done through the Web Project Control panel under the More menu. There's an Alpha Launch section, and then you can open up the Alpha Launch publishing dialog. And in there, you're going to add in your apps to publish to Alpha Launch, and an app is a UX component in the context of Alpha Launch. You can only publish UX components. You can't select a grid and publish it. But when you add those, you're going to configure the following information about your app. You're going to add an ID, and that ID needs to be unique for all applications installed in Alpha Launch. I screwed up while making this demo today and called a bunch of apps called alphalaunch.basic. And what happened was there was only one app listed in that launch and the app screen, and it wasn't the right one. So it's really important that's unique. It doesn't really matter what you put in there. I've got alphalaunch.basic. Some people use the reverse domain name where you write com.yourdomainname.www. just whatever seems to make sense there. You want to give it a name and a description. This is shown when users are selecting your app for install. You want to version it, and you want to increment that version number every time you publish a new version, because that's how our system recognizes if there's a version to update to when users are looking at your app in the installation screen. You also want to consider configuring the background color, the type of icon for your Alpha Launch icon to use, and pick an icon. I picked SVG here. The SVG one is the easiest one to work with. You can also pick a bitmap. You can skip over this iOS specific stuff for your first go at this. The rest of the things you need to look at are the download type. You want to set that to single with header, especially if you're going to Android. The other option is manifest, which downloads each file individually. And we've seen issues where Alpha Launch apps that have a lot of files time out on download if you try to use the manifest. So single with header just packages everything up as a single zip. Bonus is that it's actually faster installing it that way as well. So do that. You want to put your developer name and email in there. And then the last thing you can't see on this screen is additional assets to include in the file set. So I have 3 apps I'm going to show you guys today. 2 of them are just an app, and then one of them has some components embedded into it. And because those components are embedded in there, I need to include them in my assets list. The additional assets to include in your file set are going to be embedded components, external JavaScript you might have included, external CSS that you've saved in another file. If you've made a style tweak, it's recommended that you include it in there. If you have web fonts, other files, images, etc., that your component requires to run, you want to put that in that assets list. There is a file browser where you can go and pick those files to add them. It can be a little tedious to set up if you have a lot, but once you have it set up, you don't really have to change it. So once you've got that configured, your next step is going to be publishing to Alpha Launch. And what we mean when we say publishing to Alpha Launch is creating the files to download and uploading them to a server. The download location doesn't have to be your application server. It can be an Amazon S3 server. It can be a different application server, though I don't know if that would actually work. But that's independent of your Alpha Anywhere application server that runs to handle all your AJAX callbacks and any server-side stuff that needs to work with your app. The other thing you want to look at is generating a QR code page, and this is just like a super convenient way to just remember how to get to how to get your server installed on your device. And then once you've got all that set up, you actually publish it. So here's what you need to do in the publish to Alpha Launch dialog. The first thing you need to do is you need to select your publishing profile, and this is the profile you use to publish your application to the application server. The next thing you need to do is set your server URL. And I have a lot of slides dedicated to this because over the last 3 weeks, everyone who was had run into a problem publishing to Alpha Launch. It was their server URL was just wrong. So remember that test A5W page that you published, and you launched it, and you opened it in a browser, and it loaded. Copy that URL, copy the whole thing, the HTTPS all the way into the A5W tag if it's there, because this is your server URL. So you're going to copy that, you're going to paste it into the server URL box, and then the last thing you need to do is just delete test A5W off of the end of the path, and that's it. That's your server URL. That's where all the AJAX callbacks are going to go. If you forget the HTTPS part, that's not going to work. It's going to fail. If you've published and your test A5W page didn't load, that means you didn't publish to your application server. You published it somewhere, but it wasn't where that URL assumed it would exist. So you need to look at how your web application server is configured on your server. What is the URL that you've used In the case of FTP, you need to make sure that you're uploading your files into the web root. You can upload files in the web root in a subdirectory if you want to keep your Alpha Anywhere Alpha Launch app separate from anything else you might have there. But it's key that you get that working. If you publish the test page and it doesn't load and you get a 404 or a 500 error, yeah, something isn't right between your development environment and your server, and you need to figure out what that is. So the other piece that you need to know about is the download location. There are two places you can download from, your application server or an Amazon S3 bucket. This screenshot is from the current nightly build. It is not from the current release that's out there. I need to clarify that because my whole demo is based on this. You can use our Alpha Anywhere or Alpha Software Amazon S3 bucket to host your files for download. And that's included in the next release. You check this box here, it says use Amazon S3 as the download site. And if you leave this blank, then just take the random ID that we put in here for you. That's it. Your files will be packaged and uploaded there and be downloaded from that server into Alpha Launch. If you don't check that box, it will be assumed that your files will be published to your application server. And those go in a different location than where you've published the app files themselves to handle callbacks and such. So after you've got your server URL, you know where you want to download your files from, you've specified your publishing profile. The final step is to set up your QR code so that you can just scan that code as opposed to type in the full URL for where your apps are stored. And what you're going to do is you're going to check this box that says show a QR code with the Alpha Launch download server address. You're going to put in server name and description. These are just text strings. It's just the name of the server shown in the server list within the Alpha Launch app, and then a description of what that server is. You could have, Acme Inc. and the server description is apps for Acme Inc. employees, right? That's what you put in there. It's just a helpful piece of information so that people know that after they've scanned that QR code, they've got what they expect. And so once you fill that out, you can click the Show QR Code link that will display a page in a pop-up window. And the very last thing you need to do on that page is in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a button that says Create Instructions Page, and you want to click that. And then you want to copy the URL in the dialog that pops up, and then you want to save that, paste it somewhere. That page is invaluable. You only need to make it once, as long as you continue to publish your apps to the same place, and you can share that with everyone who needs to know how to download your apps into Alpha Launch. And I'll show you what that page looks like in a moment. And so once you've configured all of that, this actually should have been way up at the top. All those settings are what happens when you click this button. You're ready to publish. After your publish completes, you want to verify that your publish was successful. Somewhere there should be a check if files were published correctly button. This is the one shown after the Alpha Cloud publish. I haven't run through the other two, so I'm not 100% sure if this is the same dialog you get in all cases, but you're going to click that button. And you want to find that AJAX URL, and that URL should be your server URL. If that's missing things like the HTTPS:// or whatever the prefix required for accessing your server is, that URL is not going to work. So it's got to be your fully qualified with the prefix and everything. And so once you've done that, you're ready to go and add your server to Alpha Launch. Adding that's pretty simple. You launch Alpha Launch. Down here at the bottom, there's a settings button. Click on that. You click on the Alpha Software Demos up here, or whatever happens to be listed in the server web address for downloading apps. Then you're going to tap Add or Scan. I'm going to talk about Add first. If you tap Add, and then within Add, you can tap Scan your QR code, and then Save. If you tap Scan on the server list, it will open up the QR code scanner. And then after you scan, the QR code, it will take you back to the server list. You will not be on this page, but you can get to that page by tapping on the server, clicking edit, and then it'll pull this information up. And then after you've successfully done that, you go back to the main screen in Alpha Launch, and then you can go through Manage Add to add and install the apps that you've deployed with Alpha Launch. So I know that was a lot to cover. We're gonna skip common mistakes for now. I just wanted to go in and show you a few things here. Maybe later. So this is Alpha Anywhere. These are 3 components I put together, and just as we'll just take a look at basic here. This is basic. It's got a text box and a button in it. When you click the button, it displays a message box. And up here I have a control bar, and if you look in the control bar, it has an item, it's a button. The button's text says exit. We go look at its action. It calls that if a5 shell, a5.shell.exit component. This code can be found up here in insert method, and if you type down here and filter for exit, it's going to be right here. And then all you have to do is copy that example to clipboard, paste it in, and you're done. You're good to go. It doesn't have to be in a control bar. You can just have a regular button up in the header, or a regular button in a footer, or a button on the main page. Just make sure you have an exit button. And then if we look at my control bar layout here, here's the layout, there's the button. That's what it looks like in this tiny preview. And we live preview this right now. There's that button. It doesn't do anything in live preview because we're not in alpha launch. But here's my text box. I'll say Fred. And we click greet and it says hello Fred. And you say hi. And that's it. So that's it. That's a simple one. Before we go over to alpha launch, I also want to show you this test A5W page I made. If we go in here and we look at it, it just has some HTML in it. It's just got a head, H1 tag, and a paragraph. And then I've specifically included the alpha style here using this link tag. So to publish these, I published them to Alpha Cloud going through publish. I selected my Alpha Launch on Cloud profile. If we take a look at this profile here, I went through here and I said, okay, for all the default connection strings and everything. They're not used in any of my apps, so it doesn't really matter in this case. If you have a database though or something, then this connection string needs to be the connection string required for your application server to connect to your database wherever it's hosted. If we look at the publish settings, I set up a really basic publish. I just have the one site. It's going to this current version of the nightly build that I have installed. I created it, I went through quick configuration, and I just picked simple, and I gave the application a name. If you wanted to, you could make a development or development test and protection for all of your Alpha Launch apps, so then you could have separate test channels, basically, for people to try things out. Yes, exit without saving. I'm not going to publish this again, but if I wanted to publish here, I would just click OK. I've already published everything in here today, so I don't need to. And then finally, if we go under more, down to Alpha Launch, there's this Publish Apps to Alpha Launch, and this is the dialog where all the magic happens. So up here are my apps that I've added. I added them by clicking Add Component, selecting the app, clicking OK. Once I added it, I went into Edit Component Settings to set up all of this configuration. And so this is the basic. This is its ID, that's its name, a little description. There's an install message. You can put stuff here. I believe it's only shown if the app has been installed in the UI. If I had made a change just now and wanted to republish, I would come in here and actually bump this up to 4. In fact, I'm going to do that. I also set up a background color and then set up the icon. This is the color that I picked. And if I click preview app template down here, this is
Can I ask you a quick
what it looks
question
like.
about the icon?
Mm-hmm.
Someone's written in and saying, okay, it's cool that I put in an SVG, but what size does that SVG need to be sized to?
So it defaults to 42 wide and 42 high. You
Okay,
can come in here and make it bigger if you want to, but that's what the system's defaulting to right now. So I would recommend 42 by 42.
so 42 is the answer.
42
Excellent.
is the answer. Yeah.
Thanks
I don't
very
know if that
much.
was done intentionally with a
I
joke in
don't
mind or
know.
not, but
Yeah, I'm just saying.
that's what it does. If folks have questions about this IO specific stuff, I recommend you send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com and I'll answer it later. Download type single with header. Your other option is manifest. No, just single with header. One single download. Simple. Keep it simple. My developer name, how you can email me, and then this one doesn't have any additional files. So I'll click OK. I'll cancel out of that. I'll show you the other two here. So basic was a basic app. It just does everything on the client. Ajax is a little more complicated. It's identical to basic in the sense that the control bar is the same, but that greet button instead, when it runs, it makes an Ajax callback to a function called say hello, which I have put over here in XBasic functions. And all this does is return some JavaScript, which says hello, and then it shows it. And this is just a really simple example to kind of help reinforce that you've gotten your Ajax callback URL correct, which is if you haven't published to the application server, if you've decided to publish your files for download to like Amazon S3, you may be able to download the files and install them, but your callbacks may not work if you did not get that server URL correct from the start. So that's this sort of is just a very basic, simple test to kind of prove out that yes, we got it right. Close this. Nope. And then finally, I have one called dependencies, and we will take a look at its alpha launch configuration after I show you what it is. It's a panel navigator with two panel cards. Panel navigator is configured as a tab band, and the two panel cards are basic and Ajax. So this is an example of an app that has embedded components in it. So it has dependencies that need to be included when it gets uploaded. And if we just take a peek at live preview here, you can have an idea of what it looks like. So here's our basic, here's our Ajax. You'll note that in that design that I had, I don't actually have a control bar where I'd put an exit button because I conveniently already have it in the two components I've embedded. If these components didn't have it, I would want to put that exit button in my app so that customers who use my app could get back to that launch screen in Alpha Launch. So let's look at dependencies. I'm not going to show you Ajax because it's basically identical to the basic one, but here's dependencies. So up here, configuration looks pretty familiar. This is dependencies, different ID, so I don't accidentally get a bunch of the same. And then down here, this one actually has additional assets to include in the file set. And what I've included is the Ajax component, the basic component, and I also made a style tweak so that the selected tab would have a blue background with white text instead of blue text with no background. And I included those files here from that style tweaks folder, just to be sure that they're being installed. And if I had more, I would click select, I would go in here and I would browse around here and find it and add it in here. And then preview the app template. Here's our little icon there. So these are all configured, they're ready to go. There is another tab here. I'm not really talking about it too much. Well, I can talk about it a little bit. So after you've added your server and someone goes to like open up the install apps and select one of your apps, there's a little pop-up dialog that shows up and it has all this text on it. So if you wanted to, you could just come in here and say that, oh, this is my server, some message about your server, description, available app info. Maybe you say like available apps to install. Excuse me. And so, that's where you can put this here. Nothing here that you can do will change your server URL. So, server settings here, it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's not really server settings. It's more of a message that gives some information about the server that people are installing apps from when they first open that install page. So what did I do? Did I bump the version of this? Let's make that 4. Click OK. Let's bump this up and let's go publish. So here it's remembered my settings from before, but if this hadn't been selected yet, I would come in here and I would select Alpha Launch on Cloud. I would paste my server URL in from my, see if I can get it open here, my test page. I'm going to cheat and go the other direction. I would show the publishing step to Alpha Cloud, but it's a little bit slow at my current location. So this is that test page. This is where I've put all my apps up on Alpha Cloud. It works. It's not showing the test.a5w here because I set it as my default page to show. But if it was there, which there it is, I would copy it. I would take it back here. I would paste that in there. I would delete this. That's my URL. Here's that setting I was talking about earlier about publishing to S3. You can use our site. The site ID is unique to where those files get uploaded. If you want to change that, you can click this Get New ID button. There's no real reason to change that though. You kind of want to leave it the same unless you're publishing to a different server, meaning you want to have a different Alpha Launch server to separate apps that you're publishing from other ones you've already done. And then this is the QR code setup. I've already made a QR code page, so I'm not gonna click this button because it'll save another page up into the cloud, and I don't need another one. But this is the information that's on here. This instructions page, when I made it earlier, I copied it and I saved it, and here it is here. And I'm gonna go put that in the chat window so that everyone can follow along for the next section. There we go. So make that instructions page, save it. If you lose it, you can make another one, but it might be easier if you just remembered to keep it. And then once you get it, you can take all this information and put it in a different page if you need to. But that's the only way to get the content out of this window. Oh no, you can copy it. Okay, that's new. So yeah, but to get that out of there easily so you can share with others. And so once you're all set up, you're happy with this, you click OK and it'll start the publish process. And I'm going to let this go through. It's going to publish these up to it's going to publish them up to Amazon S3, and it's going to put some information up on Alpha Cloud, I believe. And this process can take a while, especially if you've got a lot of files that need to be published. Oh, it's going to put my PowerPoint presentation up there too. Oh wait, no, it won't. I didn't include it as a dependency. So all it's doing right now is copying up all the dependency information. Then it's publishing some stuff up to my app server.
Well, it's publishing to the cloud. We had a question which came in that said, does this only work with the cloud, or does Alpha Launch work with the standard Alpha Anywhere, standalone app server or
Any
app
server,
server for
you can use any
iOS?
server. You can use the
Any of the
development
servers.
server if you want, as long as you can get to it over the internet.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question for you. When you were showing the code for the exit button, there was a reference to a5.shell, and someone said, when would a5.shell be false? Because it looked like there was an if statement connected with that.
It will be false if your app's not running an alpha launch.
Perfect. And then the last question is, do apps installed on Alpha Launch work as quickly or as efficiently as, say, the native app, or as if you had built it, say, using PhoneGap build or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the case. There's
It's the
no real
same.
overhead. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last question is this working in the current release, or do we need a pre-release?
You need a pre-release if you want to use the dialog I just showed. You can make it work in the current release as well,
Yeah.
but because we're presumably on the cusp of putting out another update, I want to say eminently, but it could be weeks. I'm showing this method because
Okay.
the existing one up there. And so the only difference between what's out in the current release and what's in the nightly build is the ability to use our Amazon S3 bucket to host your files.
Oh, well, that's kind of a big deal. So if you don't want to set up your own S3 bucket, then
Yeah, well, you can't
probably
just
just wait for
publish
our
to
update.
your server. So
Sure. Any
there's
place
that
where you can get
button.
to the file. Yep.
Here's that button. Check if they were published correctly. That's my URL. That's what I look for. All this other stuff, it just lists all the apps that are in here. There's only 3 right now. But it was okay. Publish was okay. If this doesn't work, then maybe this URL was wrong. It's almost always that you haven't configured your alpha launch URL. If you don't check that box, it'll just publish to your application server, however you've configured this. So this is community edition is what I'm showing. But if we went and looked at this guy, probably should not have opened the same workspace. And so this one has all the other things, right? If I added a new profile and said like HTTP, and this isn't going to work because I'm just putting in data in here. Target folder. Nope, don't do that. My apps. Finish. So if I was gonna like HTTP publish to my server, my server URL is going to be a combination of this plus the target folder up in the web root, right? So I believe the way this works, and I should brush up on this again. Alpha Launch has spoiled me. I believe that your URL becomes like my apps, and then your test page would be like test.a5w. Like that's going to be what opens up when you launch your test page after you've published. But that's all you need. The files for Alpha Launch will be up there. It'll copy them up there. This doesn't have to be HTTP publish. It could be FTP. It could be
And will it do all
IIS.
this in the
They all
current?
work.
Will it do it in the current release?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So you
Yeah,
don't
they
need a
all work in the
pre-release to
current
do it
release.
this way.
Yeah, the only thing I'm showing here is the bucket thing that we're hosting it. So that's the
Yeah, that's
difference
the
that
only
you
new
won't
thing.
have access to. You can certainly host it in your own bucket. Those settings exist, but us hosting them for you doesn't. So, but yeah, it's whatever profile. You can do local web root. I've done that a number of times. All that matters is that the phone that is running Alpha Launch can reach your server. If your server is on an internal network and is not connected to the outside world, but people can get on your network with their device and reach that server, then you could host your launch applications there.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've lost my train of thought. I think I'm just going to start showing you guys how this looks in Alpha Launch itself. And I've actually got 2 QR codes here. This was one made for publishing to S3, and this one was made when I just published to my Alpha Cloud server. So let me see if I can get Lonely Screen to work again. There we go. Oh, I'm getting confused now. All right, so once you've got it published up there, the next step is to install your server on Alpha Launch, and this is the main screen in Alpha Launch. There may not be an app installed here, maybe you have other apps installed, but what you really want to do is you want to tap on Settings at the bottom, and then tap on that Alpha Software, that text box that says Alpha Software Demos, and then tap Add. And then here is when you can actually scan the QR code. If you want to manually type in the address, the URL, you can do that. It's this black text down here at the very, very bottom. This one is a little hard to type in, but if your website is like mythings.com/alphalaunch, then that's pretty simple. So maybe people just only need to type that in. Anyway, scanning that QR code is going to populate the named display of the URL in the description. You're going to tap Save in the upper left-hand corner to go back. The checkbox next to it means it's the currently selected server. If there's no checkbox next to it, then you want to select it and click Select. So that's the server where apps are going to be installed from. And then in the upper left-hand corner, we'll go back to the settings screen and then tap it one more time to get back to here on the main screen. So that's how you register your server in Alpha Launch. Once you've done that, you can add your apps. So if we tap on Manage Add and tap Add, see that message from server sample message, okay? That's this. So I'm not really concerned about that. So here are my 3 apps. Let's just go through each one. Here's Hello Alpha. So that's installed it. When I tap on it, it's opening up my app. You can see the exit button there up in upper left-hand corner. When I tap exit, it's going to take me back to the main screen. Here's my, so that's all working. That's our simple one. The next one is our Alpha Launch with callback. So a little simpler, but when I tap this greet button, it makes a callback to generate the JavaScript to return to the app and display it on the screen. So this worked. I got my message back. So this is definitively, yes, I got my server URL right. My callbacks work. Everything is great. Tap exit to leave. And then finally, we'll look at add the embedded components. So there's our 2 components. If I tap greet here, it makes the callback. If I tap exit on either tab, it takes me back to that screen. So these are simple examples. Obviously, I didn't include any database stuff in here. I'm happy to continue to expand those out for people to show them how that would work. But that's Alpha Launch in a nutshell.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
And then the last thing I just want to harp on a little bit are the common mistakes that people make.
Oh yeah, excellent. Yeah.
So The first two are the server URL is wrong. The one that I've been seeing a lot of people get bitten by is they forgot http://. We make no assumptions about what the protocol is on your server, so you need to include that. A few times the server URL is just wrong because they didn't know what their server was, which is where that test A5W page can help you a lot. Because if you publish it and launch it, it's going to open up in the browser for you, and that's your URL. We had a couple folks who just published to the wrong spot using FTP. They published outside the web root. It has to be in the web root. It has to be accessible over the internet. Some people have forgotten to configure their connection strings to connect to their databases. Make sure you set those up as you would any web app that you've published to the web. And then the mistake I make the most is I forget to include the exit app button, which is probably the most annoying mistake to discover because you have to go all the way through the publish upload, the whole process again to get it back up there. So those are the top things I've seen recently.
Excellent. Question. So we've gone through actually almost all of the questions. SVG sizing, A5 shell, the speed question. Does it work with other servers? Yes, it does. This is sort of a more specific question, but maybe you have an idea about it. It says, I have an alpha launch app and it shows folders from previously created components from this project in the A5 web root. I've removed the components from the project, but it's still putting them in the A5 web root each time I publish. Is there a way to keep this from happening?
I've never seen that behavior before, so I think we would need to investigate
So
a little bit more.
send that in to guides,
Yeah.
GUIDES at alphasoftware.com, and we'll be happy to take a look at where those phantom files are coming from. That looks like about it. Sarah, hey, thanks so much for going through this. I know a lot of people found it very helpful. If you do have additional questions, please send them to guides, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com. Sarah, thanks again for presenting. Thank you everyone for showing up today and answering and asking questions. We hope to see you next Wednesday at our next Alpha and Q&A webcast. Take care. Stay well. Bye-bye.